I said, but I've got this idea that I could use Wi-Fi to deliver high-speed internet and that I could undercut the NBN and outperform it. He goes, oh, how much money do you need to start it? I said, I've got no idea, to tell you the truth. I said, maybe like $500,000 would get me going. And he goes, oh, if you want that sort of money, I can get it for you next week. It was a mix of freedom, exhilaration, and just, well, I'm on a rocket ship and I'm going. I was not even slightly scared. Being scared came later. I shoot for the stars every time. I was in China with him for the Beijing Olympics with Podmo. So I'd gone on a trade mission with Kevin Foley and Ray Garan and Chris Schott, and we're meeting up with Bob Hawke. And we're sitting around a table like this in some restaurant in China or a lobby, and Bob Hawke's got like a blue and white, like kind of sailor's top with 80s like baggy blue jeans and a pair of like deck shoes. He's smoking a cigar and he's got a beer, and I'm sitting next to him. He literally puts his arm around me and he goes, karaoke bars. It ended up with the Chinese singing Chinese war songs at us, and us singing Waltzing Matilda with Bob Hawke leading the charge, and me right by his side singing Waltzing Matilda back at the Chinese.
Che Metcalfe is a name that echoes across the Australian tech and entrepreneurial landscape. From co-founding Uniti Group, a telecommunications infrastructure company that sold for a staggering $3.7 billion, to now reimagining eco-luxury with Rumi on Louth, South Australia's first off-grid private island experience. Che's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Today, we will explore what it takes to dream at scale, how to navigate the toughest transitions in leadership, and what happens when passion and purpose align. Che, welcome to Tales from the Top.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Whereabouts did you grow up, and maybe tell us a bit about your childhood?
Well, this could be long. I hope not to rabbit on
That's
too
why
much.
We've got more wine if we need it.
We might need it. So I was born in Townsville, long way from here, obviously. Very different scene then. My parents were both a bit in the uni scene, hippie kind of James Cook uni kind of thing. That's back in the day. That's how I kind of got my name. There was an old man in the hospital, in the Townsville General Hospital where I was born, and my parents didn't have a name for me, being young, free-loving hippies that they were. I just came along, arrived one day, and they didn't have a name. And the nurses took me over to this old man. He was on his deathbed, apparently, to like cheer him up, to let him cuddle a baby. And he took one look at me and said, "You got to call him Che. He's going to do something incredible one day. You call him Che." I ended up with the name Che. My brother is Daniel, and my sister is Susan. So I just got gifted this name.
Wow. Yeah. So it's very unique.
Yeah, born in Townsville.
Yeah.
Growing up in Townsville was very different. I don't think I wore shoes properly until high school. So maybe if you went to the movies, you might find a pair of shoes from somewhere and put them on.
Yeah, they always smell great, Townsville cinemas too, don't they? They always had musty smell.
And they were air conditioned, so people went to them or the mall or whatever to get out of the heat. We didn't have air conditioners. We had ceiling fans, tropical heat. Back then we had monsoons. So I grew up with a lot of animals around me, frogs, toads, like every night, frogs chirping, fruit bats, mangoes, all of that sort of stuff. Very tropical in North Queensland. A lot of swimming, a lot of sailing. We used to go over to Magnetic Island just about every weekend and barbecue and camp on the beach.
That's a good fun place. Do they still have the Mokes over there?
Yeah, they're incredible. Fond childhood memory, the Mokes.
Yeah.
Now I think they do those like Barbie cars and things like that. It's got a bit commercialised, but the Mokes were amazing.
Yeah. When I was in the Air Force, that was always, because we were always up there at the Townsville Airs for their base, and that was always a hoot. You'd go over and get a bunch of guys and race each other around.
Magnetic Island's stunningly beautiful. It just didn't have a lot for tourists, and they wanted it that way. Cairns was always known for tourism, but Townsville wasn't. So growing up there, I guess I went to a very bad public school. And when I say bad, violent, racism, both ways, everything you can think of. Very average school. Nothing like when I came to Adelaide, people would ask me, what school did you go to? And that normal Adelaide question. And when I didn't say, Scotch College or Pembroke or something, they'd literally stop talking to me.
Wow.
It'd be like that. And see, I grew up very different. in where I grew up, if you went, say, down to the beer garden on a Sunday afternoon, you might be standing next to a lawyer, a carpenter, a plumber, a doctor, whoever, and everyone just mucks in together, and you wouldn't be able to tell who was who. You wouldn't tell who has money. There weren't people going, I've got a family office and I'm from this family, and that stuff. It's kind of like this classism doesn't seem to exist. Everyone just mucks in together. So, very different upbringing to my life in Adelaide. Yeah.
So when did you move to Adelaide?
I moved when I was 18, probably going on 19.
Right, so you didn't do any schooling here?
No.
So all the schooling was back in town. So
Yes.
how far did you get? I mean, this is all good foundation
Yes.
stuff for how you actually succeed.
Well, I don't want to upset the kids of the next generation. And Natasha and I are trying to raise 2 children, so I don't want the secret to get out. I failed year 11 twice. So not just once, I did it twice. And
is that where you pulled the pin at year 11?
Yes. I by then had enough of teachers. I didn't believe them. I saw the hypocrisy. I saw that they didn't really know what I thought they didn't know what they were talking about. I was arrogant teenager.
I was going to say, was that a rebellious attitude, or did you have some sort of deep-seated questioning and doubt about these particular people who are trying to force you to learn?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, and I think a fair chunk of it was me, but it's the way I'm wired is to question things, and when I get a rubbish answer, I tend to back myself and believe myself, and that's probably what made me entrepreneurial. Most of out of anything is just questioning things and not agreeing. And some of the things my teachers would tell me back then, I just thought, this is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. I can't agree with this, and I can't be a parrot. I'd proven that I could do very well academically before that. When I started school, my parents had separated when I was 4, and I went to New South Wales for a year with my father, and I ended up at Terrigal Primary School in prep. In New South Wales, they called Form 1 was prep.
Yep.
My mother, not understanding this system, took me from Form 1 in New South Wales straight into Grade 1. So I'm born in November, so I was already, 9 months younger than most of my classmates. But they'd done a full year of year 1.
Right.
And I'd come straight from prep, which was finger painting and whatever else.
Yeah.
And because of that, they put me in remedial studies for end of year 1, year 2, because everyone else was reading and writing and I wasn't. And so I spent a year in remedial studies with other kids who had learning difficulties. It was obvious to me. And by year 3, I'd caught up to everyone else and I was doing quite well academically. But because of that, I always thought I was dumb when I was younger. And then when I went to year 7, they did some sort of exam in Queensland to decide where you were placed in high school. And I didn't realise your high school class was based on some intelligence test that they gave you at the end. And I ended up acing it out of the whole of my school. And they put me in the top class in there, and I found out that, and I beat all these people in primary school that I thought were super intelligent, and I got a higher score than them. And that's when I went, oh, right, I don't need to try anymore.
Gotcha.
So then year 8, I did quite well. Year 9, I started playing guitar, skateboarding.
Oops.
Found
the
girls.
Slippery slope. Oh, the very slippery slope.
And my stepfather was a musician, a really good musician. So, a couple of my babysitters when I was young, I'll drop a few names. The drummer from Hoodoo Gurus, Mark Kingsman. The drummer from Australian Crawl. They were both like in bands with my stepfather.
Wow.
He almost joined Sherbet and a whole lot of crazy things that he did.
So
back in the day.
what years are we talking?
So I'm born in 72. I almost aged myself by a year. So I'm 72. So he would have been around the late 70s, like mid to late 70s. He was in the music scene. He was living on the Gold Coast then.
Yep.
And he was on a TV program called GTK, which was before Rage back in the day.
Okay.
It was all very black and white, whatever. I think
Guitarist, did you say, sorry?
He's a bass player. I'm a guitarist. He taught me to play guitar when I was about probably 7. Taught me to play guitar, showed me a few things and taught me the open chords, and away I went.
Yeah.
And then everywhere I could learn something more. I used to go to all these gigs and all these practices and spent a lot of time in beer gardens watching bands. I love live music. There's something really cool about live music.
Yeah,
I remember that. I remember that.
Got to remember
time.
that question for a little bit later about.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up now. I want to ask it, but I won't bring it up now.
But I digressed. I think it was how I came to Adelaide. I was playing in bands. I'd quit school for the second time. I tried. Like, I did so poorly in year 11. I was very good at Japanese. I got straight 100% for Japanese like 3 years in a row because I cared about it. And I went to Japan and all of that. But I had no interest in any of the other subjects. And then started playing guitar and playing gigs on the weekend with my friends and stuff. I was like 16, and there was a guy from uni. He was like 20, 21, a few others, and we formed this band. We eventually started doing more and more gigs. And then I went away for a short stint to Gosford because I wanted to be close to Sydney to get guitar lessons because I wanted to be a professional musician. I was like looking up things like Guitar Institute of Technology in the US, and I was like trying to work out how I could get to one of these prestigious music schools. So I went to Gosford, and I was getting lessons off this guy called Finbar O'Hanlon, who taught me all these modes and all this crazy music theory, which I hadn't done any music.
Was he in Sydney?
Was
he in Gosford?
He's living in Gosford.
Because that's like, it's about 4 hours south of Sydney, right?
Yeah, but my theory was, Sydney's close enough. If I have to get there to get lessons, I'm in a bigger pool. I'll find a good guitar teacher. He was taught by Tommy Emmanuel.
Right.
So then the story goes, I come back from Gosford. I'd become quite good on the guitar, and we were doing pub gigs, and I was like really young, and there were like 30, 40-year-old men coming and watching me play and standing at the front of the crowd, like watching me. And then they'd come up after and go, "Can you teach me?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, sure."
And this is when you were about 18, 19.
I was 17,
right.
17, about to go on 18, just before we left.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had about 30, 35 guitar students, $20 an hour. I was teaching school kids, whatever. For a young musician, that was decent money. It was more money than I was going to get doing
mowing
other
lawns.
things. Yeah, exactly. And I enjoyed it. And so the other guitarist that I've been playing with, the uni student that I said that I was friends with, that we started gigging with, we found a singer. We had a rhythm section there. They didn't want to go. We're like, we're going to hit the big smoke. And we're like, where are we going to go? And we're like, Sydney's too expensive. Melbourne's a bit too, like, I don't know, kind of, it's
alternative.
Different, kind of alternative. We were more pub rock, kind of Angels, AC/DC. We'd done support gigs for Angels and Johnny Diesel, all of these sorts of bands. So we'd get all the big support gigs that would come through town because there was no one else to play, I guess. And, so we said, we're going. The rhythm section stayed. We're here for like 2 weeks, and we put an ad in the paper for, rhythm section. We got the rhythm section. We entered Battle of the Bands, which was back in the day in Hindley Street at the venue. It was Steve Moyes. He owned two bars. One of them was the venue. And, we're in Battle of Bands against like 40 bands, and we won.
Fantastic.
And it was like 18. We won recording time, lots of VB.
You were forced to drink VB, were you?
I'm not a beer drinker. So
okay.
The other guys at the band enjoyed that. And some money at Derringer's or something like that. So we went and bought the bass player a new bass rig, and we went and did our recording session, and we did a film clip, and we're starting to do well. We're starting to tour to Sydney with Mushroom touring, and Gudinski came to a couple of our gigs, and we're like starting to get noticed. And then, that's where it all fell apart, where I realized the seedy underbelly of the music industry and decided I'm not going to work this hard at something and be this passionate about something I love so much to have it ruined by some guy in a suit. Yeah. So I was, again, back to my, I guess, distrusting and being rebellious. And
is this the guys from Mushroom?
Part of it. I think it was Chuggy.
Oh, okay.
He was connected with Mushroom touring or something at the time, and he kind of pulled me aside at a gig in Sydney. We're playing at King's Cross at the Tom Tom Club.
Yep.
And it was pretty much like can you come out the back and meet all these girls and talk to all these people? And I said, no, me and the other guys, we're going down the road to another gig. I think the Screaming Jets or someone like that were playing, and we were really keen to go. And he's like, no, put it this way, come and do this or you'll never play like in this town again.
Today's episode is sponsored by us, Chiron Audio and Devison Design.
At Chiron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike three-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Chiron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Chiron.
Devison Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Devison Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Devison Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show.
Yeah,
Wow.
Right.
And that's when I was managing the band. I was writing most of the songs.
Yeah.
And I kind of made decisions for us sometimes. And I decided in that moment to decide for the band that we're not going to take that crap and we're going to go watch the band like we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's when I started seeing, other musicians in the industry. They were heroin addicts selling their amps one week to get a fix. And most of them were on the dole. And these were people, you'd see on the TV on Rage on the weekend. And when you found
And you
out
think,
the reality,
I want to be him
is
or her.
And all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I still love music, and I collect guitars now, and I've got a nice recording studio with a Neve desk and all of this cool stuff. Some great microphones. I don't get to use any of it at the moment, but
don't worry. One day you'll retire and you'll think, right, I'm ready.
and then I'll croak. Or the music I write is so average that I'll become like Coldplay or U2 once you've gone too far, and then I'll write Wiggle songs or something. I don't know.
So I want to ask you, going into that industry with this great burning ambition, being disillusioned by the educational system and by whatever other systems that were in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you reach where you think is a pinnacle and it's just about to happen. All of your energy's in this. How did that make you feel at the time? And how has that either set you up or it hindered you progressing through to business today?
It's a good question because it probably sums me up, and we'll see through the conversation this has happened 3 or 4 times, and something inside me just goes, keep pushing, keep chasing. I don't stay down for long. And I've known that about a lot of entrepreneurs, that it's the ability to get back up. It's not the ability to dream. Half the people can dream and put on a turtleneck and pretend they're Steve Jobs. I've seen it that many times, and talk about pivoting and talk about all the buzzwords. But when it comes to the tough times, they're the first ones to exit. That's been my observation of what goes on. And you either have that tenacious, for me, it's probably a combination of a bit of a chip on a shoulder. My parents separating when I was young, having stepfather, that kind of male in your life who's the authoritarian that I didn't necessarily get along with a lot of my childhood, being angry at the world, trying to prove that I'm better or I can be successful or I'm stronger or whatever it is that drives me, coupled with a type of street smarts intelligence where I can work a puzzle out quickly and I'll always find a solution, and that I can fly by the seat of my pants. I can deal with stress. I can do those sorts of things. But, at that time, leaving music, it was shattering. It was, I went from where I would walk into a bar to play and there'd be, 800 people come to see my band, and they'd be trying to get backstage to talk to me. They'd be taking photos of you and turning up with, printed out. Back in the day, we didn't have the digital photos. They'd gone to the trouble of going and getting these photos developed and then giving them to me. And you would have a people coming up and talking to you about guitar after, and that lead solo you played in that song, that's incredible. How did, asking you sort of stuff like that, and being very interested in your life. To I quit the band, and that was my only social thing, to zero.
Yeah.
But
where would you be now if you'd stayed in it? If you'd said, I'm going to go out the back and meet all the girls and do all this, and I'll try and float above it, but I'll try and be in it so that I can make it work.
I think if I stayed, I would have ended up a music producer, because I've got a passion for that. I like working with people. I'm a people person. I love music. Doesn't have to be about me. I would have been happy to be,
just
in
the scene.
Yeah, in the scene. I think that's probably where I would have ended up. Being a lead guitarist in a rock band, it's kind of got a limited.
Ask Mick Jagger that.
Yeah, or Keith Moon. Or not Keith Moon. Anyway, at the end of the day, that has a limited life cycle. I remember we were heavily into the American glam rock scene at that point. It was the only, before the Seattle scene, it was the only real heavy music that was around. And by heavy, I don't mean like Pantera or Megadeth or anything like that, but just heavy rock kind of music.
Yep.
Not much of it was going on in Australia.
Did you have the outfits too? The glam rock?
Totally.
Oh, do we have the pics?
I'd
love to see the glam rock.
Here's the photo album.
I had hair halfway down my back. I had a nose ring. I had all bangles and skinny black jeans and cowboy boots and the whole bit. Yeah,
the works.
Yeah, we did.
That's why they wanted you out the back with all the girls. I wanted to get the photographs, and they wanted to. I remember In Excess, the doco about him.
Yeah.
That was pick a girl in the crowd whilst you're performing and make love to her with your eyes, and do that thing, and he said, "All right, I'm going to do that." So he did that, and all of a sudden he's dead. But
well, everything's changed, of course. Back then, that whole heroin chic, looking like you're about to die, emaciated look was in, and I was lucky. I'm like 6'2", and I weighed like 65 kilos. I could
you naturally look like that.
I could not put weight on, no matter what I did. And I was a poor musician, but that probably helped. But I just couldn't put weight on, so I had the look for that time. Yeah. These days, I would be passed over. It would be like, not enough gym time.
It's all about that, isn't it? So what was the next step? We've done music.
Yes.
Where do we go?
So after music, this is where my story deviates a little. Not only did I, and this is in my personal life, not only did I leave the band, which was like a major upheaval, I'd ended a relationship that I'd had with my high school girlfriend up until then. I'd ended that, and then this woman walked into my life, and we had a very casual relationship, and I didn't want a relationship at the time. Ends up she gets pregnant, and I have a child. So that was when I was 20. So by the time I was 21, I was a father. So at that point, I thought, okay, my life is going to change quite a lot. And I ended up working at Mitsubishi. I was doing all sorts of factory work, but I ended up at Mitsubishi on the factory line. I worked there probably for about a year, maybe a year and a half. I got involved with the union. My not liking authority and questioning things came in, and I helped other workers fight some battles with Mitsubishi, who, were hiring private investigators to spy on people and all sorts of things. There's a lot that went on. These days, I'm probably less a union person, but I was interested in people's rights and doing what's right. So I was there. I also did some translating in the paint shop because it was all Japanese robots. So they'd send the Japanese out to fix the robots, and nobody could speak Japanese, so I did a bit of that. And then
you must have been quite an anomaly on the factory line, and then it's
I could be Japanese.
And then it's I can do that for you. Bring Metcalfe up and get him to Civic, do something of this. Have a whiskey afterwards. Come on, translate this, and then that would have been quite something.
No,
what an anomaly! What a fish out of water!
It gets worse because then when you hear the rest of my life story, they start to stack up, and I've actually had conversations with people where they just think I'm a pathological liar or I'm exaggerating or I didn't really do all of these things because that's like the start.
It's
of it.
unbelievable.
So, yeah, it is unbelievable. And I guess it's just that tenacity that never give up and keep trying. So I'm at Mitsubishi. I start studying part-time. I always wanted to be an architect. I looked into being an architect, and obviously it was going to take 7 years all up by the time I actually got into the industry. So I thought I'll do a look at horticulture at TAFE and then building design and drafting. So
You just wrote Jade's,
You've just written
story.
basically written my story from the time you walked into this room.
well, we could be brothers with another mother. So I ended up settling on building design and drafting. So I did 3 years of a diploma. I got high distinctions, aced everything. I was teaching all the other students how to study for the exam the night before. I worked out the cheat code to getting 100% at TAFE. Some things you couldn't shortcut, like the drawings, working drawings, things like that. You had to spend the time on them. There was no way around that. It's the sort of course that architects do at the end to actually learn how to do anything, because they learn a lot of theory and things like that. But I had been studying Frank Lloyd Wright and Bauhaus and all of these things on my own. So I had a solid understanding of architecture. My stepfather was a builder. I grew up around, so I knew timber framing code, back to front, those sorts of things. I liked the engineering side, the mathematics. I just took to it like a fish to water. Loved it. Aced everything, went for my first job interview, went in. I wrote a spreadsheet that basically did the timber framing code from start to finish. You'd start with the rafter run, and then from there you would work your way down to, you could just automatically calculate most of the timber members. And there was software out there that did this, but I built it in a spreadsheet. And I thought, oh, this is pretty novel. I showed it to them, and they were like blown away. Their like jaw hit the floor, and they're like, "Wow, you're hired." And I said, "Okay, great. Let's talk about money." And they said,
Money?
Yeah, it's like $10, $12 an hour." And I'm like,
So what year is this?
"This is so."
It's got to be
I
89,
would have started
90.
when I was in my 20s. So this is mid 90s, is it?
Okay.
Yeah, mid 90s.
Okay.
Mid 90s. I'm trying to remember the timeline. Yeah, let's call it the mid 90s.
Yeah. Sounds like sort of 92, 93.
I could look up the date. I don't have this one in my head.
Yeah, that's all right.
So they offer me it is mid 90s. Yes, because at 1999 is when I start my first business. So I'll put a pin in that. So I've done gone in, done the interview. They've offered me the job. $12 an hour. I literally turned to them and said, I could go to Woolworths just down the road and get the same money stacking shelves. I've just done 3 years. I've topped my class. I've written this spreadsheet that's shown you what I'm capable of. And they said, well, that's where everyone starts. If you want to work in this industry, that's what you'll do. And that's when I found out that architects, engineers, everyone, a lot of them are poorly paid. It's not a profession.
And it hasn't changed. No, it's not, still, it's worse now.
Yeah,
it's worse now.
And come this way and talk to the girls out the back.
It's not a profession. It's not a profession you go into to earn money.
No,
and
it was always referred to as a gentleman's profession. It was the thing that the eldest son inherited everything. Then the next son joined the military, became a priest, and then the next son, with nothing, never going to inherit anything, he had to get a profession, and so he would choose architecture because it's not really a profession, but it's something that to do.
Well, Frank Lloyd Wright describes it as having every science in it, and he talks about a piece of music, and that good architecture has music, it has visual arts, it has interior design, engineering, everything all tied into one, and it is a very complicated art form, and to get it all right. And that's why some architects are project managers, some are designers, some are draftsmen. It's
got a legacy too. That's what I love about
it. Yeah, incredible.
And it sets the design cues for
because you can't bury it like a doctor if he makes a mistake.
No, exactly.
It's built, it's up. Sorry, but that's terrible. We're going to persecute you for the rest of your life.
And funnily enough, this journey begins with architecture and ends in it, because Rumi on Louth, when we get to it, that's what that is about, I guess. So I studied, said no to the job. Then I have been a student for 3 years, full-time student. So I hadn't had a job for ages. I couldn't get an easy job easily. And I had this qualification, which to me now is useless because I could have just worked my way up in a company somewhere by now or done whatever.
In sort of some sales or something.
I had a child. It was like I needed a career. And that's why I did it. And that was a bit shattering for me. So I said, well, I'll just start my own business. And I had taken to computers. Computers were really taking off at that time. I bought myself an old 486 computer and I modded it and rebuilt it 10 times and installed 3D Studio, a pirate copy. Sorry, 3D Studio Max.
We're out of the
This was back when software was like $10,000 a pop and no student could afford it. And
AutoCAD back then was
AutoCAD
extremely expensive.
And so was 3D Studio Max to do the 3D visualization. And that's what I really liked. So I decided I'll start a company doing 3D visualization for architects. So I start this company, I buy the computer. I go around and start talking to the architects and they're like, no, we have no need for that. We still do watercolors. We do this, we do that. It was before its time. 3D visualization was just starting. And so they didn't want to know about it. And one architect said to me, but, if you could build a website, that'd be something I'm interested in. And me being me went, of course, I can build a website. That's easy. I know how to operate a computer. That's pretty simple. So,
I can send it on.
I go home, and in those days, it probably wasn't Google, or maybe Google existed, but it might have been Hasta La Vista or Ask Jeeves or something like that. And I started searching for how to build a website, and I taught myself HTML. I built a website, and I started a web design company. And so I pivoted, as they would say now, from architectural visualization to that. And I built up a little web design company. It was called Kakan Studio. Kakan Studio was the name of the architectural visualization company, but it just became web design. And Kakan is a Japanese word. Most of my companies have some Japanese influence. Is a word for space, but not space as in outer space, space as in the space in here, how you feel. So it was like Space Studio. And so we did web design, and we specialized more in Flash animation and things like that at the time, and a thing called, what was it called? Might have been called MetaBuild, or it was basically 3D visualization for the computer, and where you could get a car and spin it around in real time. And I became almost a world-renowned leader in that technology, to the point where the company had invited me to move to New York and work for them.
Goodness.
Because I'd picked it up really well. And
for $12 an hour.
Yeah. Well, we're about to get to the next speed hump in the way. Yeah. It's like every time I just get going, something comes along and crushes it. So this time it was the .com bubble burst. So I'd started that. Yeah. So I'd started that company in 1999 and had made a lot of headway in a very short space of time. And then it went from, everyone wanted a website to where if you had AFL.com, someone would pay you $1 million for it, to websites weren't worth anything. Yeah. And bricks and mortars where it's at. This whole thing was a fad. Yep. It's a load of crap, and then nobody wanted a website. You couldn't win a job. So at that point, I was looking around what else to do, and I discovered mobile phones, and that Java ME, a form of Java, was used to develop software on mobile phones. And I was like, this is really interesting. I still had one or two programmers that were left, because we used to do a lot of back end, like databases and PHP and all of that sort of stuff.
What did a mobile phone look like at this stage?
Oh, so
we're talking about Snake.
Yeah.
Okay.
A
Nokia 1610.
Yeah, I was just going to say a Nokia 1610. I still have my Nokia 1610.
It's time to upgrade.
No, I want to. Why? It's got big buttons, it's easy to read, and it feels good because I'm an old person.
I love how the phones got smaller and smaller and smaller, until 3G came out. But I'm better at that. And the parody in the
Zoolander.
Zoolander. I remember them getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But 3G came out, and then they became bricks again because of the batteries to run them. And it's around when 3G came out, and we had the World Congress on IT in Adelaide. So we could look that date up. I can't remember when it was. I had built on a mobile phone a precursor to something like combining Google Maps with the yellow pages in a directory.
You're pre-interpreting the smartphone.
Isn't that pretty much what Elon Musk did with his brother? That was a serious
similar thing.
Yeah.
And I had got the attention of Compaq and a whole bunch of other companies because we were using little PDAs then. I don't know if you remember them.
Yes.
You had the pen and whatever, so you could pull out your PDA.
A Palm Pilot.
Yes, and in the Adelaide CBD, you could look up businesses, see them on a map, and give them ratings and all of those sorts of things. The kind of thing that Google Maps became, but it didn't exist in that way then. I built that, and then I built a timetabling system for mobile phones, and I sold that into Canberra to the Canberra bus company. I couldn't get any traction here in South Australia. And I was working with a company called MNet. MNet had got about $10 million funding under, I think it was called BITS funding back then, to promote the use of 3G technology in Australia. And so I was doing a lot of work with them. They'd have a random thing like, we're going to do the Australian Tennis Open, we need this little app built or whatever. And that's where I kind of learnt the craft. But then what happened was another HTML story, and this is going to sound like I'm a bullshit artist the whole way through, but is that a whole fake it till you make it? And I guess you got to back yourself. A company called THQ called me out of the blue. And THQ, for those who don't know, is a gaming company out of London, a UK company, equivalent to like EA in the US. There's THQ there. And THQ had started a mobile division. And they were looking for someone in the EMEA region, and Australia had a pretty weak dollar at that point. They were looking for a company who could do porting. So porting is, back when we had all these phones, there were Motorola's, there were Nokia's, all the different phones. We didn't just have iPhone and Samsung. There were like hundreds of them. And they would all have different memory capabilities, different screens, different buttons. So we would do what's called porting. They'd send us the game source code, and we're talking about 64K games or 128K games, tiny little games. Yeah. And they would send us those games, and they would say, make it work on these 70 handsets. So number one, you had to go buy the 70 handsets. You had to understand them. You had to port the code, and this wasn't a skill that existed. So I had to get university students and train them up in this area and get them going. But how I started was THQ rang me. It was just before Easter or something like that, and said, we've got this game. We need you to port it to these 20 handsets. And I remember I couldn't buy the handsets. I couldn't do anything about getting the handsets. We had to try and find emulators online and try and fake it so that we could get these things to work. And they gave us a really short timeline, but they were like, we'll pay you £5,000 per handset or something. And it was like a lot of money, and it was in like 3 or 4 days. And I was like,
let's make it happen.
They were like, can you do this? Yes. And I'm like, yes, of course we can. We didn't sleep for 3 days. Me and 2 other guys, we just stayed up. I'm scouring the internet looking for clues of how we can do this. And anyway, we sent it to them, and it all worked. And they wrote back and they said, that was kind of a joke. We didn't think that you could pull that off in that shorter time without having the resources or whatever. Normally we'd supply this and that and that. It was just a test to see what you guys were capable of. So then they gave us all their work.
Wow.
So overnight. So then I was hiring left, right and centre.
See, that's a really good, and I think that I just get to interrupt there, because I think that point is a really valuable point for anyone today who thinks, I'd like to do something. I need all these resources. I can't do it. I don't get the backing. I can't do it. You have to back yourself. You've got to come up with an idea, and if you're given the slightest opportunity, anticipate the window of that opportunity and anticipate the likelihood of success if you actually beat that time, and then just work yourself to death until you've done it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people today don't get that, and a lot of opportunities for people are missed because they think, no, I want someone to give me more so I don't have to put in quite so much.
It's exactly like that. And we all get trained that, you're going to go to university, get a job, work your way up. To be an entrepreneur is very foreign for a lot of people. I always knew I wanted to start a business. Like there was that period where I said I was in Gosford and I was getting guitar lessons. I remember I always wanted to start my own business. And I remember at the train station, because I used to catch a train into Sydney, the train station, there was this florist, and I saw it had just like a little florist cart on the side of the thing, and all the men would buy flowers for their wives on the way home. And I was looking at it and going, that's a pretty good business. Low overheads, whatever, you just roll your cart up to the train station. And I remember that's my real father lived there, and I remember going home to him and saying, this florist is for sale for like, I don't know, $10,000, $8,000. I didn't have $8,000. And I said to him, do you think it's a good business? If it is, would you loan me the money? I'll pay you back in whatever period of time. And he looked at it and he goes, no, you won't make any money out of this. You're not going to get the money. And I always had in my mind, how do you start a business? Because to start a business, you've got to have $100,000, $200,000. How do you got to buy a business? I didn't understand you could just bootstrap a business and that you could just have an idea and start it. That to me was a completely foreign thing. It was only that I had studied and then decided I'm good at architectural visualization. I could go find some clients and I could just start doing that. And if it didn't work, I could have gone and got a job. But to me, that was an easy progression. And then it rolled into the next thing, and here I am. But if I hadn't taken that leap, and that was, in my 20s, not when I was younger. So I understand how hard it is for people to start a business. And I echo exactly what you said, that if you have that yearning inside of you, just whatever it takes. You hear stories of kids who get a newspaper run and then they save up enough money to buy a printer, and then they use that printer to do something else, and then that leads to something. That's exactly what happened to me, but in a different way. And I guess I was always entrepreneurial. Like I was in primary school, I was always doing some hustle. I'd go to a friend's house and make all these jaffles with his parents' food, and then I'd take them to school and sell them.
Low overheads.
I was like doing cartoon drawings of Donald Duck and stuff in grade 1 and selling them for like $2 each, and just doing random things that would make money. I was always trying to do some hustle. Or I used to go into people's houses and take their Coke bottles. They were 20 cents each.
I remember that.
It was 20 cents to play pinball.
And
in Queensland, everyone had these houses on stilts, and they'd just leave their Coke bottles under the house. So I used to just help myself. Maybe that's not entrepreneurial. Maybe that's just theft. I was recycling.
You have to define what an entrepreneur is. You see an opportunity and you exploit it. It doesn't necessarily, in the definition, doesn't necessarily anywhere say honestly.
Well, they left them under their house, perhaps for someone to take.
I think that was something sent by the good Lord himself to make sure that poor underprivileged children like us got to play pinball and Space Invaders.
But I don't condone stealing. No.
Neither do we.
Phone business. Was that Podmo?
No, so that was Kakan Studio. That led to Podmo. So Kakan Studio. So then after THQ, we started doing all of their work. Then the other companies rang us. So EA, we won their work. And there were a couple of other companies that were doing their work for. In parallel, I had built my own mobile games, and I would go to, strangely enough, the Hong Kong trade fair, the autumn trade fair in Hong Kong at the convention center, and there'd be everything under the one roof. And I would try and sell my games into the mobile operators throughout Asia. And they'd, take your game on, and every sale you'd get like 50 cents or something like that. And I never cracked that market. I never built a game that actually cut through and, Crazy Birds or whatever. If I kept going at it long enough, maybe I would have. But the porting just took off. So it ended up, 25 staff all doing porting. There was some admin staff in that, but mainly all programmers porting games.
Is that here in Adelaide?
Yeah. So it was the first company of its type in Australia, I believe. And we invented it. It didn't exist before. It just happened. So I'd come back from a trip overseas, And as all good ideas come to you, it was in the shower. We're doing these Bluetooth. We were doing these. It really does happen like that.
I should take more showers.
Maybe your brain just disconnects or something, and these things hit you like bolts of lightning. We're doing these Bluetooth games and Bluetooth peer-to-peer like networking games. And back then, Bluetooth was big. People had like Bluetooth names, and people were chatting up other people using Bluetooth and sending files and all sorts of things. And I was reading the Bluetooth spec because we were doing this network Bluetooth game. And I was like, hang on a minute. You're going to have like 200 and something channels in Bluetooth, and they're hopping frequencies. So basically in radio terms, you're going to have 200 people in one space all communicating with each other. And then I was like, what would happen if you hop from one phone to another phone to another phone to another phone, the whole tin can with the string thing? I could build basically, this is when telecommunications costed a lot. And this is 3G started, and data was stupid expensive. Mobile phones were stupid expensive. I was like, you could talk for free if you're in a shopping center. Everyone, if they had software on their phone, which I could build using Java, and they download it, they could all be a little base station, like a cellular station, and they could all talk to each other. I was like, yeah, that could work. And then I was like, I could build little Bluetooth stations, and I could put them in coffee shops all around the city. If they had enough range, eventually all these bubbles would connect up together in libraries, in wherever else. And it was an advertising platform for the retailer. So whenever someone walked past, it would ping them and say,
buy my coffee.
Yeah, buy my coffee or whatever. And then when you were there, you could browse classifieds, you could download music, you could
so it keeps people in the store, gets them in the store, and then keeps them there for a while.
But the thing was, it was a free network.
Yeah.
So instead of paying Telstra or whoever else, it was, so I called it Podmo, and it was Podmo for the people. The idea of Podmo was pods, like pods as in, it sounds a bit hippie, but pods like dolphins and mobile. This is a way for us all to come together and communicate without using Telstra, without using Optus.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand anything about telecommunications then. I got a call
all
from
the politics.
And I got a call from Telstra hated me.
Yeah.
There was one guy at Telstra who refused to. I used to do a lot of public speaking. He said he refused to be on a panel with me ever again.
Wow.
Because I was very anti-Telstra, because I knew what they did to content developers like us.
Yeah.
They would sell something for $5 and they'd give us 5 cents.
Yeah.
And then they'd say, we support Australian developers. And it's like, this is back Crazy Frog kind of day.
Yeah.
But I got a call from the Attorney General, and they're like, do you have a telecommunications license? And I go, no. What's a telecommunications license? And they go, well, it seems that your software can be used for telecommunications, and we need to understand that. We need to be able to monitor it. We need to be able to do whatever. But I had seen a lawyer, and they said, as long as you are, your device is on private property and you're not in the public space, you don't need to. So I had an agreement with all the Chibos and everywhere else. I had these stations that it was private property, and that they were providing the network, not me. And that's how I got around it. But yeah, the Attorney General.
So someone's tapped the Attorney General on the shoulder and said, this could compromise our income or from the company, or simply it's an independent communication system.
And this is post-September 11th.
Yeah.
So there was
but it's interesting because that was a few years after I think they dropped most of the license requirements for people to have CB radios.
Yes.
So unless you're actually broadcasting, you could have a communications device, which is, if we look at it, it's for an authority to monitor and to determine whether people can communicate freely and openly is quite totalitarian.
It is.
And it's completely and utterly wrong. Unless, of course, someone who thinks it's right wants to come onto the podcast next, so then I'll change my mind. But so you were right on the edge of having large corporations tap governments on the officials on the shoulder and say, please stop this person doing this.
Well, yes. So someone had whispered to the Attorney General or whatever. Something had happened. It could have been Telstra. It could have been whoever.
That's very cool.
So it was
to
cool.
be that person, to have achieved that much, and to then to have that level of...
You know you're onto something.
I do. And I think to this day it's a great shame that it never happened. And that's one of those. That's one of those moments where you could have been Elon Musk, or you could have been one of these big entrepreneurs if one of those big ideas just hit at the right time. So here comes the sad part of this again.
Uh-oh.
So I've got my.
It's worse than $12 an hour.
My mobile is worse. This is probably the worst one. So I've got my mobile porting company. We're just about to have our best, like Christmas. We've got all this work on. Another entrepreneur from South Australia who will remain nameless for now. We'll see if you can get it out of him later. Had offered to buy half of my mobile gaming company and move me to the US. And with that money at that point, houses in the US were cheap, and he lived in he was living half the year in Hollywood or whatever, and I was looking at the prices, and it was like buy a Hollywood mansion for like $1 million, and I was going to get more money than that for half of my company. So in my mind I was dreaming, I'm moving to Hollywood, I'm getting this Hollywood mansion, I'm going to set up this company in the US. I had put in an application for a grant, a government grant. At that time I forget what it was called, but it was going to fund Podmo, and I had a private investor who was going to match that. So maybe I was going to raise $4 million for Podmo. I'd never raised a cent in my life. Everything had been bootstrapped. So suddenly I was going to sell half of Kakan. I was going to move to Hollywood. I was going to grow my business, and I was going to get investment for Podmo to make it bigger on a larger scale, like to take it beyond the Chivos or whatever, and to start to play out this vision of everyone using this Bluetooth app. I had ideas, putting these beacons on homes, and so in the streets, and like all these crazy ideas. Probably some of them would never have worked, but we're just about to hit that, and the GFC hit. Literally, exact timing. Every contract we had with all of the gaming companies were cancelled. They didn't have the decency even to call us to tell us. The first thing to go after the GFC was all the big entertainment companies, anything that was on the periphery, which was mobile. At that point, it wasn't proven. Console games were their bread and butter, and the mobile was an area they were trying to break into. So they cancelled them. We found out, we were looking on Facebook, and we saw a part, it said refundancy party at THQ. And we're like, what? And then we started contacting some of the producers and that we knew. And they said, we all got marched out yesterday. There is no mobile division of THQ anymore. Wow. EA pretty much did the same thing. So we've got every contract cancelled. I've got about 25 staff. All the money for Podmo disappears. I've got like a week to try and turn this around and find people work. I'm bleeding money. I've got an office.
What was your wage bill?
Mobile phones. It was high. And I had to do the longer. I used to walk to work from King William Road, the cobblestone area of King William Road, down to Selby Street. I lived in Selby Street for a while, and then I moved out, had this office because the office grew too big. So I'd do that walk every day. I walked in. It was the scariest walk of my life. It was like I had to go in and tell 25 people you don't have a job. They'd just come back from Christmas. It was horrible.
And you didn't have a bulletproof vest or a riot helmet?
How did you do it?
No. It was horrible. I can't even remember. I just went numb. It was like
look, well done for actually facing them as opposed to hiding and making a phone call to everyone saying, don't come in.
Yeah, this is probably where I get the biggest scars of being an entrepreneur, because before that, and the part I didn't say is I did a lot of public speaking, a lot for government. They'd say, let's wheel Che out and talk about digital transformation, or let's get him in to talk about this. If there was some event on and they wanted someone to put the futuristic kind of digital world spin on things, they'd just roll me out. I was in the paper all the time. Up until that point, everything I touched had turned to gold pretty much in that business. And I had a good reputation, and I'd started a program called Mega, which was the Mobile Enterprise Growth Alliance with all these other people. We were teaching young entrepreneurs how to make a business out of mobile, again, ahead of its time. All of that just came crashing down. The phone stopped ringing. The staff hated me. They didn't want to speak to me. Again, that was my social life. That was like being the musician, stopping from that again. So I lost everything.
Yeah, well, just fell apart overnight.
Not only that, I was in big debt. I had all this debt in my personal name as a director of the company. The other co-founder and I were in a relationship. We'd separated, and she didn't want to know about any of it. She left me to deal with it all, with all the creditors,
And is this
the tax
mum?
department. Yeah, so I've got 2 children. By this time, I've had a son as well,
Right.
so another person who I had met.
So you've got 2 children at this
2 children.
stage.
Yes,
Right.
and
how old are they at this stage?
so Sophie, my daughter, would have been 12, 13, and Jackson would have been 6 or 7. And yeah, so we lost our income completely.
Yeah.
100% income gone, debt. Like I said, she didn't want to know about it, didn't want to deal with the debt, so it was up to me to try and sort it. Long story short, our relationship comes to an end. I think it's one of those things, you go through something like that, it's what the strong stand up and get going. And I'm not saying she's weak, but I wanted to get on with life and sort it out. And I think part of that was, ending that relationship and moving on. And I then spent, 4 years in the wilderness doing whatever I could. So I did some real estate. I did some web development. I did a stint at Flinders University helping to commercialise medical technology. I did whatever I could do.
So at this stage, your I'll do anything I can do jobs are actually quite good jobs. They're actually mid-level jobs. They're not. We're not talking about stacking shelves and collecting rubbish.
It's not running a big business with 25 staff.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a parallel to the level of job that you coming to.
But you've gone from being a CEO to bouncing out of bed every morning, loving what you do. I would literally be sad on a Sunday when no staff are in. And I would sit in the office on my own and work. I was a workaholic. All I cared about was building something and creating something.
A lot of entrepreneurs talk about this, where you don't base your self-worth on your business. Because if it does fall over, then it's just like, it's not you failing, it's a segment of
it takes everything, doesn't it? It takes heart.
That's right. Something that you created. But were you able to do that with that fall, or?
No, I don't think I was, because I'd say that entrepreneurs who can do that are using other people's money. So up until this point, everything I had built had been me. I built it all on my own from the ground up. Yeah. So it's like a child and losing a child. It's akin to that. You put everything you can into this for, say, 10 years, and then it gets taken from you, and you no longer have that life. You no longer have any of that. It just goes. It's like, it's the worst part of building things is the chance. It's like having a pet, Yeah. I like having pets, but I don't want to have them anymore, because that loss, you have a dog for 10 years and it's your best friend. And then
buy a Galapagos tortoise. They live for 150 years. They'll live outlive you.
Or some parrots.
That's right. I'm not taking it for a walk because it took 12 years to get to the shop.
I had that thought late in bed last night going, my dog's 5. Right. It's just like...
No, it's horrible.
It's already halfway.
And we just lost our
it's devastating. I didn't get a dog. It was like 7 years before we got another one last time, because it just wipes you out.
Yeah, Natasha and I have talked about this. Maybe we'll get a cat at some point, because
they don't like him.
No, cats are independent. It's like what you were saying before.
Easy
detach yourself
like
from
them.
the company. A cat can come over for a cuddle every now and then. Yes, you'll be sad if it passes, but a dog is kind of like there by your side every day as your pal.
I
need another.
So I know I didn't take it well. It was my whole identity. Remember, I've moved from North Queensland to make it in the big smoke.
That's incredible.
I've got into music thinking that's my thing. I've ended up leaving that jaded, disappointed, had a child very young, ended up as a factory worker, decided this isn't for me. Nothing against factory workers. It just wasn't for me. I'm going to go and study. I'm going to go back to academics, which I disliked. I didn't want to be academic. And I will study, and then I will make something of myself. Come out the other end of that and realize I've studied the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time. This isn't for me. Started a business on a whim, followed the bouncing ball, built something amazing, and then had the rug pulled out from under me. Now, sure, I would have made mistakes in that business, and sure, some of the responsibility is mine. But the GFC, I was no economic master. Yeah. I had no idea some subprime.
Even those economic masters suffered as well.
Yeah.
So you needed a crystal ball, not a master's degree.
So I feel like that business was stolen from me. But what it did do is it did give me a real kick up the bum and made me appreciate what I had. What I had, and that if I had this opportunity ever again, I was going to make it succeed no matter what. So that's when, I guess, if we go on to the next chapter, was when I started Unity.
I actually want to ask you this one, because I was, I've obviously read about your story, and I look at starting an ISP, and I go, that's something that Telstra does. When we were kids, you know what I mean? It's like that's what the government does.
Yes.
So
or small countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So how does one wake up one day and go, I'm going to start my own ISP?
Well, it's funny. There's a couple of little things in that. So it was me trying to resurrect Podmo in some way, shape, or form. And there were these incubators that were going around. They were like Mega that I had started myself 5 years before, but they were like newer ones. I think it was called Innovise or whatever. And I remember that one. Had met with some of those people, and I was like, I have this technology. I still own it. I don't know what I can do with it or what. So I had some of these sessions with them.
So we're still in Adelaide?
Yes, still in Adelaide.
Okay.
And I'm doing whatever jobs. At that point in time, I think I'm doing real estate. And I'm meeting with them, and they had access to the equivalent of listing on the ASX, but it's still private. I forget the mechanism, how it all worked, but people would invest and you would get money for an idea. So I was putting together a pitch for that. Remember, I'd never raised a cent from anyone ever. Mm-hmm. And part of that, I ended up meeting Jana Matthews. Jana came out from the US, and she ended up teaching the MBA at Adelaide Uni or something like that. And she was like touted as this amazing person who's come from the US and who's going to teach all of the South Australian entrepreneurs how to be better. And she'd written books on being entrepreneurial and being a CEO and all of this stuff. I read her book and didn't agree with her philosophy. She sat me down and said, basically, you should start an app company and you should call it Blue Max. And I'm like, yeah, but Podmo was this revolutionary thing that was going to take on the world, take on the establishment. It's for the people. It's this like uprising. It had a thing to it. Just making an app company and calling it Blue Max, it doesn't really cut it. It's not what I'm about.
It's not about heart.
Or the infrastructure.
Yeah.
No, so that all kind of fell apart. So I was back to square one, and I just happened to be, I would look on LinkedIn, and I had quite a big network on LinkedIn, and I came across this person, and their profile, it said they'd done like Russian nuclear plants. They had written the Queensland Commercial Tenancy Act. They got the Inventor of the Year in 2000 or something for something, car alarm or something like that. And it just went on and on and on. I listed all these things, and I'm like, who is this guy? I've been in Adelaide for a long time, and I've met most of the entrepreneurs and most of the people in the scene. I've never heard of this guy. So
Bruce Candy.
I wrote to him. No, his name's Greg Eaton.
Okay. So I thought it was going to be Steve. I thought there was an internote in this.
I wrote to him and I said, would you be free for lunch? I'd love to pick your brain on, all these things you've done. I just thought it was so interesting that someone had done all of these things. So
out of Adelaide?
He said, yeah, sure. And he goes, what are you up to? And I said, I had this company. I've been doing all these like kind of day gigs. I said, but I've got this idea that I could use Wi-Fi to deliver high-speed internet, and that I could undercut the NBN and outperform it. I said, but I can't do it without money. It's not the sort of thing you can do without raising money. And I'd been studying the US market and how all of their telecommunications network is so disparate. You might be in a Midwest town and one fiber operator owns the whole town, or a wireless operator or whatever. And I saw that some of these towns had this wireless operator who was delivering high-speed internet over Wi-Fi. So I started researching it and modeling it, and I went to speak to him, and I said, he goes, how much money do you need to start it? And I said, I've got no idea, to tell you the truth. I said, maybe like $500,000 would get me going. And he goes, if you want that sort of money, I can get it for you next week. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound legit to me. Anyway,
come meet these girls out there.
Yeah, it's another one of those stories.
but you will have to take boxes.
Yes, and but literally, was 1 or 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, and it was from an anaesthetist in Brisbane, and his name is Jules, and he ended up being the founding investor in Unity. He was on the board. He ended up doing very well out of uni. I won't tell you how much money he made, but he made a lot of money.
Good on him.
He had one phone call with me on the phone and said, "I'll invest." Anaesthetists are typically on, $500,000 a year. They've got free cash. He invested it. 2 days later, the money was in my account. I quit my job and I started Unity from my bedroom. The first thing I did is I started building the website. I ordered some demo equipment. I started scaling roofs and installing masts and connecting up houses in my neighborhood just to test the software and test how it all worked.
Can I just go back? The money lands in the account. You have this dream, this idea. You think, I know this is going to work. I just need to get the money, and then I can make all of this happen. It's risky, but it's going to happen. I need some money. Oh, sure. Here's some money. Oh, my God. The money is there, a large sum of money. It's there ready to go. All of a sudden, now everyone has these expectations. Now, you're already seasoned entrepreneur. Other people who are listening to our show, they're going to think, well, I want to be in that position. I've got this great dream where I'm going to do this, and this money lands in the account. What was going through your mind when the money hit the account? Did you have the trepidation, or or is it just a very clear vision of now it's time to go?
It was a mix of freedom, exhilaration, and just, I'm on a rocket ship and I'm going. I'd never had anyone put.
So no trepidation,
not even slightly. I was not even slightly scared. Being scared came later. It came later. Call it naivety. Call it what you want, enthusiasm.
Belief.
I always joke and say I'm Tigger out of Winnie the Pooh. That's just me. I'll be bouncing around, getting excited. And maybe a bit too excited sometimes. That's why I'm good to be next to someone who's a bit more level-headed than me. But I shoot for the stars every time.
But you always have a co-founder, don't you? Like I was looking through, and it's just like that seems to be a running theme. Is that is that the reason why?
I think I like working with other people. And I'm a fan of family businesses. I've grown up in around family businesses, seen family businesses. I just think one person on their own can't do everything. No. So and you have to rely on the other people in your team. So having a co-founder helps. I've never had I've never really been selfish either, that I'm just like, this is all about me and this must be mine.
Is that the secret to working with other people, or bringing someone in, is being able to not be selfish and not focus on how much am I going to get, but let's simply make this work.
Yeah.
I think it kills a lot of business partnerships doing that.
So I think there's two types of entrepreneurs, and it was the same with musicians. I remember people saying, I got into music because I saw Kiss and I saw they got the women, so I picked up a guitar, like that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there are people who, they just love music. I fall into that category. I just love music. I didn't do it for women or any of that stuff. Yeah. And it's the same with being an entrepreneur. I think I had a chip on my shoulder and something to prove, but I didn't do it for ego. I did not do it so that I could lord around and go, I've made more money than the next person, or I'm very powerful, or any of that sort of stuff. That's not what drives me at all. Success.
So much inner belief, though, and it's something that keeps coming up with almost every one of our guests. Yeah. It's like, do you know how to do this? No. Can you do it? Yes. that seems to be a running theme about. Yeah.
Well, that's why they say fake it till you make it, and then some people end up in jail because of that. It doesn't work out for them. What was the blood one? Thalios or whatever, that lady in the US who could, with one prick of blood could diagnose everything, and it was a complete fraud.
Yeah, and
but if she pulled it off, she probably would have been the best.
But that was a great parallel. But she had the thing that she knew didn't work.
Yes,
and that was
at some point she knew. But then do you go down a rabbit hole, and are you so obsessed with achieving that and you become deluded? Did she deliberately mislead people, or did she just believe that she could crack it eventually? I don't know.
I think it was the latter.
Yeah.
Because
Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah, that's
it.
That's our producer, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, Marcus.
Yeah. So, where were we? I forgot. I lost our train of thought.
Sorry.
That's all right.
No.
We were deep into Unity.
Yeah, Unity. Yeah. So we just started Unity. The money's in the bank. Started, for me, it's freedom. I'm back on the horse. The shame of the last 4 or 5 years living on the, in obscurity, the phone not ringing anymore, no one wanting to talk to me.
State government didn't call you, did they?
No, nobody.
What is with those guys? It's like,
but they wheeled me out.
Look, John
what
Bannon.
they did as soon as you were successful, right? Oh,
100%.
yeah, come this way. It's something that we did, and I put my name to.
John Bannon would have come and called you and see if he could have a bit of a chat, but he was a bit out of it then.
I mean, it's funny when we get to Rumi, we'll get to that. There's a similar thing going on with that as well. I'm not good with politicians or politics. I've been told many times back when I was probably more left-leaning that I should have been in the Labor Party, and I have spent some time with Bob Hawke in China and things like that, and I do think I would have had a great time with those guys, and I do think I could have made it.
Oh, yes. I liked his phrase on when America's Cup. If anybody...
he's a bum.
He's a bum.
Oh, and
tell him
when he obviously, I think he was our best Prime Minister, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
When he broke down, tears and literally snots draining out of his nose because of Tiananmen Square, and then he gave every Chinese person in Australia then a visa to stay, and they call him father, because he's the one who gave them a chance. Because if they got sent back to China at that time, they would have been
very interesting about Bob Hawke is that he was a Rhodes Scholar. And one of his greatest claims, which is extremely important, and I don't think this conversation could go any further than to acknowledge the fact that Bob Hawke was able to scull a yard of beer in about 3 seconds or something.
And he'd be at the cricket and people would run up to him with a glass and he'd have to
do it, Bobby, do it.
It was a great era, wasn't it?
It was a great time.
I'll just tell the story very quickly. I was in China with him for the Beijing Olympics with Podmo. So I'd gone on a trade mission with Kevin Foley and Ray Garan and Chris Schott, and we're meeting up with Bob Hawke. And we're sitting around a table like this in some restaurant in China or a lobby, and Bob Hawke's got like a blue and white, like kind of sailor's top with 80s like baggy blue jeans and a pair of like deck shoes. He's smoking a cigar and he's got a beer, and I'm sitting next to him. He literally puts his arm around me and he goes, "Che, don't tell Blanche I was drinking." And I'm like, first of all, when am I ever going to run into Blanche, Bob? That's right. It's like suddenly we became best friends. And I was his partner in crime.
How cool is that?
It was very cool. And we ended up in like karaoke bars. It ended up with the Chinese singing Chinese war songs at us, and us singing Waltzing Matilda with Bob Hawke leading the charge, and me right by his side singing Waltzing Matilda back at the Chinese, and then they would sing a war song at us, and then we would sing another Australian song to them. That's
pretty cool.
So let me get back to your earlier concern about your character as everyone thinks he's a liar because everything sounds too good to be true.
Definitely going to write the book.
No, there were other people there. Chris Schott, if you ever speak to him, he could back me up on that one.
That's great. Amazing. Wonderful story. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You could almost finish at that point, write a book.
I've been told a few times I should write a book because the story is a bit unbelievable. And
there's one in all of us. Mine's only about this thick, though.
Mine might be 10 pages, but jam-packed.
I think it'd be a few novels. I think it'd be a few.
So, we've got the money. If that's where we're up to, we've got the
money.
We're
up to that,
and we're going to do a proof of concept. So we decide that we're going to go to Amy Park in Melbourne, and we're going to put Wi-Fi everywhere in Amy Park as a proof of concept to get attention for the Wi-Fi stuff that we're doing. So we teamed up with the Melbourne Storm, and we won a contract to go and put Wi-Fi in the stadium for everyone to use. And we built a platform which was for spectators, so you could vote for man of the match, see advertising. It's kind of mixing Podmo and Wi-Fi together in a stadium. And then AFL heard about it, and then we were going to Etihad, which is now Marvel Stadium, and we started working with them, and that's when Telstra got wind of what we were doing, and they were like, we have mobile rights in this stadium, we have whatever, and that all got shut down. But by then it had given us some credibility and some acknowledgement. And what had happened then is the anaesthetist who had invested at first had told all these other people, so he'd be in a surgery with the brain surgeon or whoever, and he'd go, and they go, oh, what are you up to? You know, anaesthetists, they work for 5 minutes and they sit around for 4 hours while the surgery's going on. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, I've invested in this startup in Adelaide. And they go, what do they do? And they go, oh, high-speed internet. And they go, oh, how do I get in on that? And then so all of these Brisbane like anaesthetists and medicos started investing in it, so putting more money in. So at that point, we started doing in earnest what we ended up doing, which was finding a high building or a tower and putting radio equipment on that tower, and then you put a little radio dish on a house and you point it at the tower. Now, we were capable of doing 100 megabit per second connections then, when the NBN over the last mile copper was only doing maybe 8 megabits per second.
So tell me, I often go back to the year because it helps give context to the value of these issues. So what year was this?
This would have been 2014.
I was going to say.
Okay. Yeah.
It's very cool. I mean, I showed, I got it at my place, and it blew me away at the time because it was all of a sudden I'm on the phone to, the help desk, and they're pulling up a satellite view, and then they're looking down on the roof of my house and going, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. You've actually got enough elevation there, then that'll go. And I'm going,
but you might want to clean out your gutters.
So I built that software with my team.
Because that blew me away at the time.
Yeah. So back to the spreadsheet that calculates all the timber framing code. I can architect software and I can work out what it needs to do. I'm not a programmer. I had a team of 5 software developers there, so I didn't physically build it, but I led that team.
I literally got off the phone with that, and I was telling everyone about it because it was like wizards and spells to me at the time.
Oh, you don't know how many iterations of that software I went through and how many crazy ideas I had.
Yeah.
I had one idea where on the tower, because it was all line of sight, and our biggest enemy was trees. So what we would do is we would buy LiDAR data, so 3D models of whole cities, and then we would calculate a line of sight in 3D geometry to your house to see that you could get the service reliably, automatically. Before that, people were climbing on roofs and looking at the tower and trying to spot it with binoculars. We built software to do it.
Yeah.
Everything in Unity was automated from start to finish. And that's one of the things we're known for is our customer service, the ease of use. People would call us in the morning, and that afternoon they'd have a 100 megabit connection that NBN said, oh, we can't do anything for you, or we might be there in 6 months, and we would just go and solve their problem immediately.
I'd like to get that now.
Yeah.
Let alone in 2014. Yeah. I mean, we had that issue today when we're trying to communicate between our studios about that soft the
you just
project
need a laser
we're
on
working
the
on.
dish, and then it can cut holes in the trees.
No, I said all of that, but that was actually that's what I was going to get to. Then that was one of my ideas.
Just use the force.
I was just going to put a high definition camera on top of the tower and just then have your GPS coordinate and have it all mapped to GPS coordinates, and I'd just point the high definition camera at your roof. If I could see your roof, you can get the connection. But there were privacy issues with that and all sorts of things. But I went through so many ideas of how to automate that from start to finish.
It was spectacular. It really was incredible.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time on that and a lot of money, and it's software that I think Unity could have sold, but I didn't get a choice in that. We'll get to that after. So we start putting this stuff on towers and on roofs, and at that time it's rats and mice. It's like convince anyone, go to the local fish and chip shop, and they're like, my internet's crap. I go, oh, do you know that I can get you internet tomorrow? And just so the first 100 customers, it might take 6 months. And then
they sell it for you.
They write good reviews. They tell a friend. They tell someone else. Someone's complaining about internet. They go, oh, go to Unity. But in parallel to this, I had met some of the royalty of internet in Adelaide. Simon Hackett, John Lindsay, all these guys. And John Lindsay was very supportive, but others were very dismissive. They were like, we tried this 10 years ago. It doesn't work. The economics don't stack up. The technology's not there.
And if you get it right, then you're going to make me look like a dummy.
Well, there might have been some ego in it, but the main thing was they weren't looking at it with fresh eyes. They were looking at it how they looked at it. I looked at it at the right time. I was in the right. That was where I was lucky. I looked at a technology that others had dismissed and gone, the only way forward is fiber. And I've gone, wireless has come a long way. It's cheaper. It's outperforming copper by a long way at the moment. And we're in a transition from copper to something else. Who's to say that wireless won't just keep jumping ahead? And it did, right up until when I left Unity. I didn't leave, I got fired. Well, we'll get to that. Right up until that journey ended, I was looking at millimeter wave technology. All radio works in spectrum, so depending on the frequency, and that's why it's called millimeter wave, is because it's in the area of the frequency that it's in. That was doing gigabit speeds, 4 or 5 years ago, wirelessly. So my aim, I was working with the SA electricity provider, not ETSA, the wholesaler.
SA Power Networks.
I was working with them to put one of these base stations basically on every third power pole or whatever it might be. So that, but going back to the Bluetooth kind of repeater on everyone's house, having this high-speed internet available across whole suburbs where you can just point a tiny little dish on your roof, not very far, and get gigabit internet instantly. And that's where I was going to take the company. But I'll probably fast forward a bit and we'll go back. So we get first 100 customers, word of mouth. We start getting more and more customers. At this time, I'm still climbing on roofs. I'm doing installations. I've got a contractor who's helping me. I'm learning about occupational health and safety. I'm working on roofs. I'm learning about telecommunications law. I'm like building a business from nothing. We've got a call center. I'll be on holidays in North Queensland visiting my parents, and I'll be answering a customer service call while having dinner with my parents at like 8 o'clock at night, logging in and rebooting radios and doing all of this sort of stuff. And then eventually, we got our first customer service person, we got our first installation technician, and then everything just multiplied and it just kept growing and growing and growing. But that's where the problem hit. We outgrew the small investors that were putting they're large amounts of money, but for telecommunications, you're talking about companies spend billions of dollars on infrastructure. So we were growing so fast that the cost of the equipment, by the time we did the install and the cost of the equipment, it might take 6 months to pay that back. And you might sign someone up to a 2-year contract. So it's fine over the life of the contract. But the cash flow to be able to, you're burning, every customer you sell, you're burning some more money. So you need to keep raising money. So that's where I started shopping around for more investors. I tried in Adelaide, and sadly in Adelaide, the same thing that had happened for every other business I've been involved in. There are a lot of tire kickers, a lot of low ballers. I had a lot of people who say, I'm very wealthy. I've got a family office. I come from this family. I've got a lot of money, and they'd come along and Shark Tank you and offer you $50,000 for half your company. And I'm like, come on, this is silly. We already have a valuation of 15 million or something at this time. I'm like, this is a silly idea. It's not going to happen. So we end up on the East Coast. Where it really turned around was James Spenceley and Tony Grist, who Tony Grist founded Amcom and James Spenceley founded Vocus. Amcom joined with Vocus and they became big behemoth in the telecommunications industry. Had one phone call with James. I got his attention somehow. Had one phone call with him. Half an hour later, he's like, I'm in. Tony,
half an hour.
We're so backwards
on the phone.
It's so frustrating.
Because everything I said made sense.
We've got the electricity on though now, which is great.
We've heard this story so many times.
Yeah, we have.
I'm sorry. It's just,
and we've both lived it as well.
Yeah, everyone has to go.
You do.
It's crazy.
But I knew what I was talking about. You can't bullshit someone like that.
Yeah.
So everything that came out of my mouth, he goes, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I see that. And then he'd ask me a question and I'd answer it like that. So you can't make that stuff up.
Yeah.
So he had a good bullshit detector. So they put a small amount of money in relatively. It was $1 million between the two of them. And, Vocus was think it was a $5 billion company at one point. They put in $1 million on a very, very tight contract with very hard targets to hit.
Yeah.
But what they did is they attracted everyone else. So we eventually ended up with Bell Potter in Sydney, and they would shop us around to all of the big investors, the institutional investors. You know, there's those two streets, if you've ever done it in Sydney, and pretty much every bit of money is in those two streets. And for some reason, there's a lot of South Africans and Scottish people. I don't know what's going on there, but it always is. And you'll go in and you'll have a meeting, and you'll just raise $5 million at that meeting. So I would just jump on a plane, fly to Sydney, fly to Melbourne, do a whole bunch of meetings, come back with another $5 or $10 million to grow the company. And it just multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. But in doing so, every time we did that, we were diluted. So eventually, myself and the other founder, we ended up going under 5%. If you're above 5%, you're like a major shareholder in the company, and you have to disclose that. We eventually went under that. But we'd raised a lot of money, and it's that whole thing of, you know, the bigger the pie is, the smaller your slice, but the value of that slice could be more than if you owned it all. Yeah. And that is exactly what happened, except for as it grew and grew and grew and grew. At this point, we're probably a team of 60 to 80 people. And we're starting to get really good market share in South Australia, and we've expanded into Victoria, and things are looking really good, but we need to keep raising money. So we decided listing on the ASX is the best way to go. We do everything for an ASX listing, which takes about 12 months all up. A lot of hard work building a prospectus, everything you write in your prospectus. If we said we've got faster internet than the NBN, we have to prove that legally in the prospectus, and everything has to be double checked because you can't lie to potential shareholders. So we did all of that work. You're talking about weekly meetings with accountants, lawyers, a lot of work, a lot of money. Eventually, we list the company, but just as we're about to list the company, we get a phone call. We've added new board members. We get a phone call. Supposedly, we got a phone call from, it might have been James Spenceley, it might have been Tony Grist, I don't know who, basically saying he needs to go. We need a more experienced CEO in the seat when it goes to ASX listing. If he doesn't go voluntarily, I'm going to spill the board and I'm going to ruin the listing. Wow. Now, I don't remember which shareholder said it, so the names I said before might not be them. It was someone of that ilk, someone who was powerful in the shareholder group. At that point, I had all of these kind of golden handcuff clauses in my employment contract, because I knew as I got less and less power that somewhere along the way someone might try and get rid of me. So I was like, I had to be paid out 2 years' salary. I could remain on the board. There were all of these things. With a gun to my head, I was told either, you know, spill the board, ruin the listing, screw the whole thing, or you renegotiate and sign this new agreement with the chairman, and which I did, which they put a clause in that basically said if they fire me, I can no longer be on the board. I get nothing. I'll walk away with nothing.
This is the day you IPO'd, yeah?
So this happens like about a month before we IPO.
Right.
And I had agreed to hire a new CEO to replace me. I wasn't arguing with that. God. And then it was pretty much gun to your head, renegotiate your contract, which I knew then meant they're going to get rid of me. I didn't know it was going to be the day after the listing. And the reason I didn't know is that in the prospectus, my name, you can go read it now, my name's mentioned like 300 times. Che's going to be the CTO. Yeah. He's going to lead the wireless division of the company. He's got all these ideas. He's going to move it forward. There were shareholders who revolted afterwards, and the share price tanked and everything because they were following my journey and believed in the company because of me, and I built up a lot of goodwill. But on the good side, people talk about that day. I saw it coming. I knew it was coming. I could smell it in the air. I knew what was about to happen, but I was like, surely they wouldn't put me in the prospectus. Maybe it'll happen later or whatever, but it happened. Just got called in an office. There's a strange HR person sitting there from a contract company, and they're like, oh, this is your last day. I'm like,
Oh
okay.
my God.
Yep,
The
no worries.
HR person.
Yeah, and then they-
It wasn't
So not even in front of the board.
it wasn't a Che, come in,
No,
we need to have a little chat
literally,
with you.
Literally got frog marched out. Like
Good
I'm sitting there
grief.
deleting my whole phone, going, yeah, no worries, whatever. Not that I was worried about what was on my phone. I was just like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
This is done. At that point, I almost had some relief. I was like, it's good that this is finally over. And then you got to go get legal advice. You got to work out what's going on. But the worst thing was, for 2 years after listing, I was in escrow. So I had all these shares that no one could do anything to take away my shares. But I had bonuses that I was due and all these other things which they wiped out with my new contract.
I bet they did.
So then I had all of these shares, but I was in escrow. Because of my position, because I was now the CEO of a pretty well-known company that was publicly listed, you imagine trying to go get a job this time.
Yeah.
And I've got no income for 2 years.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let me stay on the board. They wouldn't let me do anything. It was like, get out of here. They told all the staff to stop speaking to me. So I'm back at that hole of I built all of this thing and then I'm out
This is
the
the
door.
third time in your life that this has happened, where all your friends have gone, all the
Everything.
thing that makes Che gone.
Which same thing. And I put my blood, sweat and tears into that thing. But I knew they couldn't take my shares. And I also knew, I don't want to call them sociopaths, but perhaps the people running the company were a bit that way, and that all they care about is making money for shareholders, and they're ruthless. To the point where they took the Mentos out of the boardroom. They said, this is an expense we could do without. That's a true thing. And the mantra was, if we spend $1, we make $2. So anything you spent money on was to make shareholders money. So I was like, my money's safe. I hired the right CEO and the right board that are going to go and
because they're getting rid of the Mentos.
Every dollar. And I knew that they would grow the company, and they did. And funnily enough, I was meeting with the lawyer, and he was the guy who helped us do the listing, and he'd become a friend at that point. And I was saying, he goes, when are you going to get out? And he goes, you should get out the day you get out of escrow, dump your shares and sell them. And I said, no. I said, I reckon I'm going to
still got faith?
I reckon I'm going to hang on till $5. I said, I reckon it'll go to 10, but I'll get out when it's 5 because I'm not going to be greedy. A forced sale happened, $5. It was like I predicted the price. I don't know how I did it, whatever. It ended up, all my shares were worth $5 each. I didn't sell them. I hung on to them the whole time. That was a tough period though. COVID hit. I was in escrow. It was COVID. Jeez. I was completely isolated. It was like a bad time. But coming out of that is when I bought the island, and that's when we'll get to my happy place. Exactly. So, have you got anything else to ask about that?
No, that's you've literally gone through I haven't looked at my notes once. I've got 100 questions here, and you've just ticked them all off in order. So thank you so much.
I think that's look, I reckon.
No, I reckon
that's a story. I just sitting here and thinking, all the parallels. And when I lost my company, and I had because I brought these investors in and said, "Oh, we love this. It's going to be fantastic," and they took the vision and they manipulated the vision. Said, "You're not the guy. We're going to take it because we've got this guy," and it was out.
It's very common.
And I lost it. 10 years of building this wonderful company. It was all about design and architecture and interiors and beautiful stuff. And they only lasted 6 months. That failed.
Oh, good.
Because they took the visionary out, but they didn't realize that the visionary actually was the key man.
Swing games are a good idea, though. Sorry, it's an inside joke.
Well, that's one of the things, one of the ingredients they didn't have. So what they did is they did a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Everything that we'd built from the ground up through sales and marketing, just guerrilla marketing and grafting, and obviously raising money and shareholders believing in it. But that's selling too. You sit around a boardroom table, and I was like a trained monkey. I walk in, I would have this presentation. I would know every word in that presentation. They would question me about anything, about our P&L, about where our EBITDA is going to be in 2 years' time. They could ask me any question. I'd just rattle it off like that. And that that's knowing your stuff and being genuine. And
Yeah.
they say people invest in the person, not in the business. And
Yes.
I do
Yeah.
believe in that.
Yeah.
And that I'm a very honest and open person. And I think that's just why they believed in me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop later on. When people put a lot of money behind you, people get wobbly. And if you just miss one target by 0.5%, and then you're under a lot of scrutiny. And that's
Yeah.
the thing you don't realize. As long as it keeps going like this, there's no problems at all. Everyone loves you and it's fine. The moment there's one little wobble,
Yep.
then you're in big trouble. It's like being Ken Hingley at Port at the moment or something like that.
If I take it back, so you look at the Unity journey, would you do the same thing? Would you take on that level? Would you dilute yourself that much? Would you take on that much investment?
No. So that leads me into Rumi, and that's why I won't. Well, Natasha and I are very, very keen to keep this as a family business. It's legacy business. We were just talking about this on the way here, how we'll just jump straight into Rumi. How
could you, before we do, can you explain what Rumi is?
Yeah, so Rumi on Louth, Fuller did the branding
Could
for
you
us.
bring up some images for us? Yeah.
So Rumi started out as just Louth Island. In 21, when I came out of escrow, I bought that. I had always had this dream, growing up barefoot in North Queensland, I had this dream one day that my ideal retirement.
Not just buying yourself a pair of shoes.
No, it was, that would have been a good start. Was actually getting rid of the shoes, buying an island and just being barefoot every day, fishing, crabbing, whatever.
That sounds like everyone's dream.
Yes, it is. Anyone who gets to know me for long enough knows I love fishing. Like, it's my happy place. It's like I love being out on the water, sailing, fishing, whatever. I love it. Swimming, whatever. But I particularly love fishing. I just have an affinity for it. I love it. Makes me happy. Makes me relax. Switch off. Like watching crap TV.
Yep.
Which is also a good pastime of mine. But I thought I'll buy an island and I'll just retire there.
As you do.
That was my dream. So I used to go to, there's a website, privateislands.com, and I used to go and shop on it all the time, and I'd dream. And I'd go to bed at night and I'd go, when I buy my island, I'm going to do this with it. I'm going to do that.
Was that the energizer for everything you did?
So I did a lot of daydreaming when I'd go to sleep. I used to always go, so I used to buy an occasional lotto ticket, and back then my ambitions were much smaller, and I used to say, what if I had $2 million? What would I do? And then I'd go through the shopping list in my mind.
Jaguar XK120.
I'd go, I'll buy my mum a house, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and then, like most people who would win the lotto, you'd spend all the money in a few months and then go bankrupt probably, but because you don't have that income coming in. But I always used to daydream about what I would do with money, and whether I manifested it or not, I ended up eventually having a large sum of money that I could do things like that with. So I had been shopping for islands, and I found this newspaper article, and it was in the Advertiser, and it basically, the headline was something along the lines of, it would still be there, something along the lines, for the same price as a Sydney mansion or something, you can buy your own island, or Sydney house, you can buy your own island. And I looked at the article, and it was regional development had been talking in the article. So I found their number and I rang them and I said, is there any chance that island is still around? It's probably sold. Could you tell me how much it sold for? Because I found an island in South Australia, because I was looking at all these islands in Canada, the Philippines. There's one that Mel Gibson owned that I was talking to a broker about, and all these different islands. And I was like, it'd be good to get one in Australia, but there aren't that many freehold islands in Australia. Anyway, I find this island. I thought it's definitely sold. And the guy goes, oh, no, actually it didn't sell. Nobody managed to negotiate a price with the family. It's still on the market. This is 10 years ago. And I said, so it's not actively on the market? He said, no, but I could introduce you to the family and we can talk about it. So I introduced to the family, and it literally took a year, not because they're difficult, because they love the island, and it's they've been there since 72, which is when I was
going to say, I saw it on Wiki, it was like 71, 72.
No, 72.
Yeah.
Right. So they took it over in 72. There was another sheep farmer before them. They were a German family, and they had owned it since 72 and farmed it, and the whole family like pretty much grew up, trips to the island, and it's their like kind of home.
Yeah.
And it was sad in that way that I was buying it from them, but it literally took a year of getting to know the family, talking to them backwards and forwards, valuers, all sorts of things, until they finally agreed to sell it to me. And then when they sold it to me, my original idea was, I'll just build a really big house, maybe a few shacks, and then at Christmas time, I'll invite my whole family, friends, family, and we'll have this island paradise. And I was just going to go there and do catch and cook, because I was right into these YouTube catch and cook videos where you just go to an island with maybe a bag of rice and some flour or something and catch fish and live off the land for however long. And this is, post-COVID. So I'm like, I'd love to just disappear onto an island for 6 months and not see a person and just go fishing. So that was my idea.
First name Man, second name Friday.
But then me being me, I spent some time on the island and some camping and just looking around on the island. And I was like, this place is just so incredible. It has this feeling about it. And I now know that it wasn't just me that had some connection to the island. Everyone who goes there, it eventually gets them. It's normally by day 2, we see a change in our guests. Day 1, they might be a bit uptight and they're still frazzled from their day-to-day life. They're still checking their phone or whatever. By day 2, you see there's a change in them, their body language, they're relaxed, they're smiling, they're sinking into the island. And it is an incredibly beautiful island. It's rugged and at the moment it's quite dry.
As is most of SA.
There's not a lot of rain at the moment.
Yeah.
That being said, we've planted thousands and thousands of natives which are still alive and are going to make it through to when we finally get some rain.
Yep.
And it goes green overnight. So that's the beautiful thing about the island, that we have a Mediterranean climate, which is rare, because as what I've been telling, Tourism Australia and South Australian Tourism Commission, we've got something unique here, a private island in a Mediterranean climate that is 100% off-grid, all renewables. So there's no power, there's no water that goes to the island. Everything is 100% off-grid. So a luxury, eco, off-grid, private island resort in a Mediterranean climate just doesn't happen.
With almost zero pollution.
Zero.
With a very, very clean environment.
Other than some petrol boats which were running at the moment, which we're forced to do because we couldn't get electric.
But there's no residual pollution from the last 100 years of industry on there. And we have, because most of our atmosphere and most of our weather comes up from the Arctic. Like Kangaroo Island, we have one of the cleanest environments. We have the cleanest environment in the world. So it's just... Yeah,
it's sheep farming and bird poo.
Guano.
Yeah, so you got a guano-rich, nitrogen-rich soil, which is going to give you
on that. We've got
stuff.
So we love the ecology on the island, and it's been a big problem for us because of there's a department called the Environmental EPBC, Environmental Protection Board Council. Now, they have great powers under some act to be able to stop your business if there is an endangered animal on that island and they haven't evaluated what you do with it. Now, in our instance, that's a hooded plover, and it lives on Crown land. It doesn't live on our land. Our land, normally when you own waterfront property, you own to the high water mark. In this case, there's Crown land above that, which is where the hooded plover breeds. But because we are in the vicinity of the hooded plover, somehow the onus is on us to protect the hooded plover and look after it. Now,
the birds that they lay their eggs in the ground?
Yeah, just straight on the sand, and gulls predate on them. If humans walk too close to the nest, they'll abandon it.
Pretty aggressive.
Yeah. So they're
and it's all your fault.
There are different types of plovers. These are tiny little cute plovers this big.
Yep.
The ones you're talking about are in parks, and they're taller, and they swoop you and attack when you go near their eggs. Yes. I don't like to say this about them, but I say to people they're some of the dumbest birds in the world, just laying their eggs out in the middle of nowhere with no protection. That being said, we are very protective of them and we look after them, but that's caused us problems, a lot of planning and issues. Now, I'm a greenie at heart. I grew up
barefoot.
I love nature and I want to look after nature, but there's bureaucracy's gone mad and the amount of red tape. You could write a book that's 10 pages long on how to look after a hooded plover, and they could have handed me that and said, you must follow this to the letter of the law. We will be checking up on you, and if we see that you're contravening any of the things in this 10-page book, then we're going to fine you $1 million or something, and I'd sign it.
Yeah.
Instead, we're probably somewhere around the $600,000 mark in environmental plans that we have to pay ecology companies who write plans that then go to these departments, who then come back and say, we need another plan. And say, and it goes round and round, and they all know each other.
Thank goodness you've got a background in architecture and planning. So I think let's go back. We've jumped forward and left a bit. So let's go back to your island, what you bought, what your vision was, and what you've done. Let's get the big picture, and then let's focus in on what's happened.
Yes, I told you once you start me talking.
No. More wine.
No, I don't think it's enough.
Okay.
I've been going too slow. So bought the island, vision, family, friends. That's it. I'm looking around. I see the place is too beautiful, and that I have to share it, and I have to do something bigger, and I have to be true to the island. So then I'd start designing a modest resort, some sort of accommodation, maybe self-contained cabins, maybe a small restaurant. At that point, I was thinking of like a charcoal barbecue, kind of open barbecue area with a pergola, kind of where people could come and eat, like almost like a caravan park, but an upscale caravan park. I'm thinking about that. And then one thing leads to another. Next minute, we're talking about a $60 million development with 26 earth-sheltered villas, 2 restaurants, a day spa, boardwalks, tennis courts.
So we've gone from a lazy $300,000 for some mates to come over with a tent and a barbecue to
60 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yep. Okay.
Yes. Yes. And that has led to a whole lot of other things that's led to where Natasha and I are now, which is very hands-on in the company, but we can get to that in a minute. But that vision will keep growing, and I dare say at some point it'll be $150 million resort. Yeah. But what Natasha and I are really passionate about is that's our legacy. This is a passion project. And like we said before, architects want to build something to leave something behind. And I think I'm returning to my roots in that way. The opportunity to take an island and have that experience from when someone lands at the airport and they get chauffeured to our compound and then driven over on one of our sea legs. We've got these amphibious ferries that drive into the water, very like James Bond, take you to the island. And then we curate the whole experience from there. We take the best of the island and we put it right in front of the guest, and we transform their life, the way they feel that day, whatever, to have that influence over someone and their experience through the architecture, through the food that you give them, through the staff that you've hired to look after them, all of that. That's a very exciting, enticing thing for me. And Natasha and I love doing it, but what we set out to do originally was have someone else would run the resort. And that's the mistake I guess we made, is believing that was possible, that you could
won't share your vision necessarily.
You could transplant that vision into a manager who would follow it out the way that you would, and that you could trust them with that. Now, excuse me, neither of us are control freaks or have hero complexes where we have to jump in. We were literally forced to jump into the business because it wasn't being run in the way we wanted it to be run, and the vision wasn't being carried out. So here we are now, literally working 7 days a week, pulling long hours, doing all sorts of things on the island.
Happy?
Happy, but we want to get to that point where
not always tired.
And some of the vision is achieved. This is a 10-year project. And we didn't think we'd be hands-on. So at what point can we stop being hands-on? Is it 4 years in? Is it 3 years in? Is it 5 years in? Do we have to be in for 10 years? That part we didn't count on. So, the obvious thing might be take on some investors, find someone else in the industry who does this all the time, hand it to them.
Loss of control.
and I don't want to do that.
I'm going to interrupt again because I'm an extremely rude person. Correct. So a couple of things. This is where you come in and say, "Oh no, you're not, Jay. You're a very polite fellow. Even your wife thinks so." Couple of things you mentioned. We're going to go back all the way to the very beginning when I said, "Remember that thing," because I'm going to talk about that. You've grown up wanting to be thinking that architecture was the thing. So we come all the way forward to a thing that is something that you're in control of and you're going to create this thing. And you've also mentioned a name, Natasha. Number one, what have you done with architecture and where's it all gone and who did it? And number two, probably the most important thing is, who is Natasha?
Well, we'll start.
I'm waving to her. She's sitting just over there.
Well, yeah. So that's leads to a very interesting story, and this is a personal touch to the story. This is less about being an entrepreneur. It's part of it. So the architecture on the island, originally I had designed, and we were building what I call a boat shed on steroids. It was clad in spotted gum, and it was like one of those American barns.
Yep.
Had these massive big sliding doors, and you could drive all the boats and the farm machinery and stuff into it and hide it away. And it's just up the boat ramp as you come up the island. So that was meant to be like the first thing we built, and we could attach power and water to that because we had no power and water.
And you've designed this?
Yeah, as in it's just a shed off of from a shed builder, and then I've decided to clad it in spotted gum and what the slab's going to look like and so on and so on. And then it becomes apparent that we're going to have trouble with planning, and that if we want to start this project anytime soon, Natasha isn't on the picture yet, that we are going to have to convert this shed, and we're going to have to put in some accommodation, and we're going to have to put in some sort of cafe restaurant, and we're going to have to convert it. This is a big shed we're talking about. And that will get the business started, and then there'll be 5 rooms for accommodation above, a modest restaurant, and then we'll build from there.
Yep.
Part of that was that we had spec'd Venetian plastering in the rooms and the restaurant. Enter Natasha. Unbeknownst to me, the interior designer had contacted Natasha and asked her to quote on the project. I get this proposal. I'm looking at the proposal. I'm like, yep, this all looks good. This is about what I expected. But there's some pictures in there of this beautiful lady doing this Venetian plastering. And me being the not sexist that I am, just assumed that must be some model that they've got. I'm thinking plasterers are big, burly guys and like concreters.
Yeah, an 85-year-old Italian man.
And there's this beautiful woman on there doing the plastering. I said they must have hired like a model to pretend to do the plastering, right? So Natasha's eventually turned up to do the job. She's there with about 5 other men that she's got in her team doing the plastering work. And I was away on holiday somewhere, so I didn't meet her. And I came back and I saw the plastering. And then she was back for her second trip. And this time she was there with one other person. And I walked in to have this meeting. And this is where I'll talk from her version. This is where we met. She felt this energy come into the room. And she turned around. She was plastering on a wall there. I saw her out of the corner of my eye. I walked in. I was with about 10 other people. We're having some sort of site meeting. And she turned around and looked at me, and she felt this energy. She's like, that's weird. Because at this point in her life, she didn't want to know about men. She'd had enough of men. I didn't really want to know about women. I'd had enough of women. We're both in exactly the same place. So we weren't really looking. But she felt this draw, this energy. After the meeting was over, I saw her there and I saw her colleague, and I walked over to them and I said, has anyone shown you around the island yet? And they're like, no.
Wow.
And I'm like, no, there's no pickup line at this point. It was just genuine being friendly. Welcome to the island. And they said, no, we haven't. And I said, well, in your lunch break, I'll show you around the island. So I showed them around the island. And then they were regularly going to a hotel and having these French martinis because they both had children and they were working away, and they were that was their time out. And I had invited them to barbecue at my place. The Matildas were playing. It was the World Cup. And I'd invited them over just to a barbecue with some other tradies, my brother and these other people who were working on the island, and we all hung out. And Natasha and I just sat down at this table where I was preparing like a food platter, and she just jumped in and straight away and started helping me. And it was like we'd known each other for 50 years or something like that. But it was exciting at the same time. It wasn't boring, but it was like we were just so calm and natural with each other. And, we just started hanging out together. And this other person that she was away working with, I didn't know whether they were a couple, whether they were boyfriend. I didn't know anything about their personal lives at that time. So I wasn't looking at Natasha in that way.
In the romantic sense.
I was interested and intrigued.
Yeah.
And then, we just got to know each other a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually we started dating. And then, fast forward a year and a bit, I'm living in Melbourne. We're married. We got married on the island. It was literally like love at first sight.
Which is only how many weeks ago now?
Come on,
get it right. You've got to be tested.
There's a bolt of lightning hit me now.
No. It'll be something thrown from that room because Natasha's over there.
It's been about 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
Congratulations to both of you. That's wonderful. That's
great. Yeah. It literally is like a love at first sight thing, and I said it in my vows, which were all recorded, so they'll be in a video somewhere online at some point, because we're using
and also
our
into
wedding.
The international court of I didn't do that. Yes, you did. You're in big trouble.
Yes, but we videoed the whole thing because Natasha, being Natasha, she's very good with money. I'm very loose with money. She decided that our wedding would also double as a marketing exercise, so we got videographers and photographers so that we can market weddings on the island, which is obviously a very prudent thing to do. So the whole thing was filmed and everything. But I said in my vows that it's funny, you don't know until you know. You think you're in love and you go through these relationships. And I was always thinking I didn't know why my relationships would eventually fall apart. But then I met Natasha, and then I was like, I think I understand it now, because the connection is so much stronger. The feelings are so much stronger. I now understand when you see those little old couples and they'll be 90 and the guy goes, I'm more in love with her now than I was then. I get it now. Brilliant. I used to think, how's that possible? Yeah. My partner eventually annoys me
But it doesn't have to be like that. So my wife and I, we met, so my wife and I like you, I went into architecture and design. And in 1986, when I left high school, I thought, what am I going to do? Actually, possibly that's where I ended up. But the reality is I wanted to meet a nice girl. At 18, I was ready to get married and start the family, do the whole thing. So I've met lots of girls at nightclubs and what have you, but I wanted to meet a girl that there's some real value there. And I thought, what is she going to be? Well, she's probably going to be a homemaker, sort of interior. I'm going to do an interior decorating course. So I did. I signed up. I'm thinking, right, I'll go to, come out of footy training. Not that I played football, and I'd go and do an interior decorating course. So I did, and I met the most wonderful woman in the world in 1987. We spent a year together, 4 years apart, got back together, and she's 2.5 kilometres over that way, and I'm looking after our boys who are 22 and 24, and she's the most wonderful thing in my entire life. So that connection, that power is exactly, I understand exactly. And you've got a very similar story, because your wife and you and Angela have been together since 1743. And so look, I'm hearing what you're saying about the relationship and the power and that. And if you haven't been there, it sounds like some sort of fantasy fairy tale. And nobody believes it.
And also not everyone finds it. And that's the thing.
No. And that's sad.
So I had relationships where I'm good friends. I've had relationships where there's lust, but I'm not good friends. But no, I've never had all of it in one person, and that deep connection. You can't explain it until you've got it. And
you need to be there, and you need to live it. Yeah, so well done.
When it hits you in the face, but you don't know until you don't.
That's great.
Until you know.
Yeah,
we could almost end the whole night on that.
It sounds so cliche.
But we got a lot.
No, it doesn't. My parents just celebrated their 60th, which was just amazing, like just 3 or 4 days ago, which is incredible. And what was my dad's line? Oh, when lust turned to love. It's still there 6 years later. No, it's great. We have one last question, which is, how do you define success?
Well, it's changed. I would have said accolades from my peers, respect, like admiration of something you've achieved. I would have said that was success, and that's what drove me all of this time. I would say now probably to me it's even more important, but it's always been important to me to stay true to yourself and to be honest and to be genuine and appreciate the relationships around you, because I think any good business is built on relationships and people. And if you can maintain a relationship with your significant other, your siblings, your parents, friends, your colleagues at work, whether you're a boss or whatever, I think that inherently leads to success in all other areas of your life. So I would say that developing your emotional intelligence, continuing to grow as a person, is definitely not defined by money. I think money follows that sort of success to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Well said. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you.
It's been inspirational. And I
don't want to bump the microphone. Thank you.
No, that's fine. It's been so inspirational. Thank you so much for joining us. From the top.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Chiron Audio or Devison Design and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you are more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au. Many thanks goes to our producer, Marcus Franks, and our editor, Jeremy Devison. Make sure you hit subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Please take the time to leave us a comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Tales from the Top.